It is a West Virginia Friday night here at the Voice of College Football. Welcome all Mountaineer fans and bring more with you here to hear from Golden Blue Dude. Of course, check him out on YouTube. And of course, Travis Kenobi from Last Word on College Football. Boys, what's going on tonight?
Another great Friday night. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
Just living the dream.
Absolutely.
It's good to at least know someone who's living the dream.
Yeah, I'm going to live vicariously. I'm going to live vicariously through Travis.
Yes. Well, listen, I never said it was a good or a bad dream. So.
Oh, no.
Well, it would be a dream of many Mountaineer fans to nab JT Daniels. It would be fascinating to know what's going through his mind in terms of his priority list. I got to think he wants to get developed for the NFL.
Yeah.
That's got to be close to the top. So he's visiting this weekend, right, Chris?
This weekend, the 9th.
Do we know that he's already been to Missouri and Oregon State? I know he was at Oregon State.
Yes, he's already been to both. And honestly, from what I've heard, this was his last trip, and this is what he's been waiting on to make his final decision. So this is his final trip, and after this, it's when he's going to make his final decision. I think West Virginia has a good shot. I really do.
Okay. I don't think there's too much to discuss here when it comes right down to it, because unless we know something about whatever angle he's taking on this one, we know this is a win-win situation for West Virginia. JT Daniels would be the starting quarterback.
Well, yeah, but I would. A lot of people are putting a lot of their eggs into the JT Daniels basket. I think whether he comes to West Virginia or whether he doesn't, I think we're actually in a good situation either way. I think we have a great quarterback battle going on. I think we have a great offensive coordinator that is developing those quarterbacks. That's the biggest difference from last year's West Virginia team to this year's West Virginia team. We didn't have that Graham Harrell, that, former quarterback, knows how to talk to quarterbacks, knows how to build them up, knows their strengths and weaknesses, knows what plays to call. I think that's a big asset that a lot of West Virginia fans are just not getting right now. And there's, I'm going to bring this up real quick. There's something that's really ticking me off going on around the West Virginia media outlet. And it's the negative media that keeps going around saying there's something wrong at West Virginia. We had a bad basketball season. We had a so-so football season. West Virginia is going down the drain. What's the problem? And they keep putting out articles saying this person said something's wrong with West Virginia. This expert said former player that left. Long-time West Virginia great. Just piling it on. Something's wrong at West Virginia. Listen, what's wrong at West Virginia right now is people like that putting out negative media saying that there's something wrong about West Virginia. You're running off athletes. You're running off potential recruits, high-level recruits. People need to stop doing that. There's nothing wrong at West Virginia. What's going on at West Virginia is going on everywhere. The transfer portal isn't just affecting West Virginia. It's affecting the entire nation. NIL affecting the entire nation. West Virginia's fine. We went out and made some great moves last year. Graham Harrell being number one. Our offense will be much better. So whether we get JT Daniels or whether we don't, the offense 100% will be better. I think we average at least a full touchdown more as far as average points per game than what we did last year. I think West Virginia is most definitely a 30-plus point average per game in this coming year, consistently.
So far be it for me to join the detractors of West Virginia football. I will not do that. But as I pass it on to another West Virginia expert here, Travis, I will say if West Virginia does not sign JT Daniels, where do the Mountaineers stack up from 1 to 10 among Big 12 quarterbacking rooms?
That's a good question.
Very good.
And I think the answer kind of remains to be determined, because you have, absent JT Daniels, you do have three quarterbacks who between the three of them have a collection of 150-ish Division I Power 5 football snaps among them. That's not a lot. That's not a lot of experience. But each of those quarterbacks does have the raw talent and ability to show something. It just depends on which one emerges. But I'd probably rank them until they show differently. You almost they have to prove themselves, right? So you with absent JT Daniels, you'd have to rank it in the 7 to 8, maybe 9 range, just because there's nobody yet proven.
You want to think the better question is right here? I think the better question is, where does West Virginia stack as far as best offensive coordinators in the Big 12? Because that's the big difference, going to what Travis just said, yet to be proven. That's the big difference from last year to this year, is we have an actual offensive coordinator, proven offensive coordinator, that knows how to cater to quarterbacks. So I think that's going to be the biggest deal for West Virginia. We have talent in the quarterback room. Problem is, last year, the talent didn't get developed because there wasn't really that quarterback guy, that offensive coordinator to do that. This year, we have that. So right now, as far as the quarterback room, I agree with Travis, yet to be proven. So maybe 6, 7, 8 range. But you couple that with one of the best offensive coordinators, arguably the best offensive coordinator in the Big 12, and that might bring that up to maybe a 4 or a 5 before game day, and then you get that game experience. We might be talking about a top 3 quarterback room by the end of the season.
Yeah, it could be, and that's, you can't discount that Graham Harrell has taken young quarterbacks and molded them quickly. I mean, JT Daniels being an example. I mean, he had 1 year of experience before Graham got there, but prior to that injury, he was slinging stuff around with Graham. And then Keaton Slovis comes in, hadn't really had any experience to speak of, and he comes in off the injury and he plays lights out for several seasons. And we'll, I know this. I know our pit troll that likes to join this chat will enjoy and remind us that we'll face off against Keaton Slovis first game. But Graham Harrell has that proven track record. So I'm less discomforted by the fact that if we don't get JT Daniels, we have nobody with significant experience because of it. But you still have to prove it on the football field in order for you to be taken seriously.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I'm not going to cut it loose on a ranking right now, but I just tend to believe, and I know, Chris, you're looking at it from a different perspective, that JT Daniels is a pretty significant upgrade, unless one of these other guys is better, and it's a complete unknown. To Travis's point, it's a complete unknown. But if we're gonna rely on recruiting rankings and what they're supposed to deliver, then JT Daniels, we know what he can deliver. I think it would be a huge, significant upgrade. I'll call it that, significant upgrade.
Yeah, well, I would say that, again, I agree with you. It's probably too early to really rank what all the other rooms look like, especially because, with the transfer portal and NIL, the quarterback room is, every team sees changes in the quarterback room. Half the teams in the nation have transfer portal entrants or, exits in that room. But yeah, JT Daniels would have to put us near the top. 1 through 3, somewhere in that range in the conference, if he enrolls. It really is that significant of an upgrade. So I agree with you there. I'm hesitant to put an exact number on it, but yeah, it would be a game changer for the offense and for the team.
It would definitely be foolish to say that, not grabbing JT Daniels doesn't hurt us a little bit. Yeah, because he would be an upgrade, but he would be an upgrade for the right now. I think for the future, we're fine. we have the quarterbacks we need. We have our future quarterback, phenom freshman Nico Markle. But the problem is, Neil Brown does need to win right now. How big of a learning curve does Nico have? Now with JT, you already know what he can do. So it's potential versus what we know. We know Nico has potential, but we also know that JT can do this, this, and this. So it's that learning curve that really has people, oh, we need to get JT just in case that learning curve is a little bit larger than what we thought it was. So Nico's going to be fine in the future, but we do need to win as soon as possible, especially if Neil Brown doesn't want his coaching seat to get hot. So yes, JT Daniels would be a massive upgrade for West Virginia. He could start immediately and give us, athleticism, immediate experience, but he's not the answer for the entire problem in West Virginia in the future. We have that in Nico Markle. So it's two different ways to look at it. He can solve the problem immediately now, but there is no future problem. He's not the answer for the future.
Eddie, appreciate you being here. He's got a question coming in. Eddie's a Mizzou fan, so we know where he's leaning. Hey, Mark and Chris, have a question. Is Mizzou having a Luther Burton? So Luther Burton is the #1 wide receiver in the country, just signed at Mizzou. One of the reasons why Missouri surprisingly had a top 12 or 13 class in the country, an advantage for JT Daniels. I can't speak to that specifically, but it only makes sense that, yeah, JT Daniels is evaluating the coaching staff, their ability to get him ready for the NFL and develop him as a quarterback. He's evaluating, I would think, the offensive line. He's evaluating the weapons to see, hey, where can I succeed? Where can I personally succeed and where can we win? And maybe it's where can we win and where can I personally succeed? I don't know his pecking order, but it has to be near the top, 1-2 or 2-1.
Yeah, I would think the offensive line might be at the top of the list because first and foremost, he wants to stay healthy. That way he can get to the NFL. I mean, yes, he wants to succeed. That is a major priority. But if you get injured, that goes out the window real fast. So I think looking at the offensive line is going to be a super high priority for JT Daniels as well. And I think that is an advantage for West Virginia because all of our guys are coming back. And if you look back at last year, at the beginning, they struggled a lot. But after that bye week, you could see that offensive line come together and get better every single week. So I think that's a major positive that's going in the direction of West Virginia. All of the starters from last year on that offensive line are coming back, and they got better throughout the year last year. So as bad, think of it this way. As bad as the transfer portal has hurt West Virginia, the one lucky thing that we got out of it is it didn't touch our offensive line.
Yeah, at least not the starters.
Right.
And frankly, I don't think last couple of years we lost some depth, but since Uzebu transferred, I don't think we've lost anybody else in that unit, have we?
Nope, not that I can think of.
I feel like we might lose, just by the nature of things, we might lose a depth guy in after spring. But that's the thing. I think I've said this here before, but to me, the transfer portal makes the most sense when you're talking about guys who find themselves, buried beyond the 2 deep on a depth chart, and they've been there for a year or two, and they just can't work their way in. And those are the guys. I mean, you don't really miss those guys when they leave.
Yeah.
You wish them well, and you say, "Hey, good having you here. No hard feelings." Unlike, Akeem Messidor, for example.
Yeah, and I think Doug Nestor coming back is huge, especially because we had high expectations for him last year, but I think it took longer than expected for him to develop that chemistry with the other starters. But eventually it did happen. I think Nestor's in for a breakout year this year as an offensive lineman. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say a breakout year because he was all conference in the ACC, so he has played very well previously.
Yes.
But breakout year for West Virginia, yeah, I would say that that's true. I mean, last year he played over at least half the season, maybe 7 games with a club on his hand,
Yes.
protecting a broken. Well, I don't even know what it was, but a broken something in that arm.
I think it was a broken hand bone, wasn't it?
I think so, but I don't like to speculate. I don't know exactly what bone it was. So broke something in his hand. But he still graded out as the highest rated offensive lineman for us on season wide scale. So he still played well. It's just that everybody remembers those first 4 or 5 games when we couldn't run the ball at all without his help. And, it's just testament to people remember the bad that you do before they remember the good that you do.
Exactly. Yes.
Gamecock Chuck asking, hello, guys. If you had to put a percentage on getting JT Daniels, what would it be? Well, I'm going to give the sarcastic response of 33%. Got 3, 2, 1.
I knew it.
There you go. Well, but at the same time, I'll give a little lean to Graham Harrell. Okay, I'll give a little lean to Graham Harrell. Other than that, I don't know. You can look at each situation and come up with reasons why he might lean in that direction. So with the Graham Harrell connection, I'm going to go to 40% on WVU.
I would go 45 at West Virginia, and then I would go probably another 35 for Missouri, and then the remaining 20% to Oregon State.
I'm just gonna. I guess I'm gonna parrot Mark. That's going to be the theme of the night for me, I think, because I was going to give the sarcastic 33% answer myself, and primarily because JT Daniels is mature and he's a veteran now, and the way he's handling this is he's not really talking to reporters or media. He's not really answering any questions about the process. And what I understand from his other 2 visits is that he's skipping the pomp and circumstance of it and getting straight to business. I want to see your playbook. I want to see what's going on. I want to see who's around me. The very things that Mark was saying he would be interested in. Who are my weapons? Who's my offensive line? And what kind of game plan do you have if I go there? That's what he's focused on. So it's really, we're all guessing at this point. JT Daniels knows what he wants, and he'll know in a couple of weeks, and he'll let everybody know where he goes in a couple of weeks.
And Travis, just to extend on your point, all those are checklist items. So anytime most of us have a big decision in life, we've got those checklist items, okay, pros and cons. But then you also have, of course, he's making visits to campus. And then there's going to be some intangible, it just felt right, or it didn't feel right, or, I could see myself here, but I can't see myself there. And some people take that into small consideration. For other people, that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for him is he's going to choose the place where he is going to impact immediately, fit in right now. Weapons important, yes. Offensive line important, yes. But honestly, I think maybe that playbook might be near the top of the list as well. Being familiar with the playbook, the system that complements him the best. And that's the main reason why West Virginia is getting a lot of love from people for JT Daniels, because of Graham Harrell, and he is familiar with that playbook. So I think that's a big thing, familiarity with that playbook and the person himself, Graham Harrell. I think that's a big part of the equation, and that's why I really do like West Virginia's chances here.
It's an interesting comment coming in from John Kelly in regards to the enthusiasm building up for the game against Pitt. What was the last game? Travis, I'll start with you. What was the last game that you felt this type of, and I'm assuming you are maybe not here in April feeling it, but the anticipation that you will be really excited for this Pitt matchup likens to what? When was the last time you were really just amped for a West Virginia, whether that be an opener or just any game on the schedule?
I think it's probably last year, Virginia Tech, and renewing that rivalry. Pitt and Virginia Tech are really our most, I don't want to say hated foes, because we love to play them, and we enjoy the trash talk that goes back and forth with both teams. And believe it or not, like, I know Virginia Tech fans don't want to admit this if they can help it, but West Virginia and Virginia Tech culturally are almost identical programs. And what they've accomplished over their histories and when they've accomplished it, also almost identical. It's kind of eerily similar. But Pitt is, 70 miles up the road, and we hate them the most, and that's the biggest rivalry. So really, it's Virginia Tech is the most recently we felt this way, and I felt this way about a game. But I think at the end of the day, Virginia Tech kind of pales in comparison to renewing that rivalry. And hopefully, Pitt's going to be favored in that game because of what they did last year, and having Slovis and having their entire offensive line back. I think, 4 of them are 6th-year seniors because of the free COVID year. They're going to be heavily favored. But we're kind of hoping we put on our own 13-9 magic and leave Pitt with an early season win that sort of helps right the ship, and defines the season early a little bit.
Yeah, I think the key phrase is what comes closest to it, because nothing will match it. I mean, Pitt, West Virginia, that's a different animal. So yeah, I agree with Travis. The game that comes closest to the excitement of West Virginia Pitt is that Virginia Tech game. And I actually went to that game last year. I've been to many West Virginia games, many home West Virginia games. That was the loudest, raucous, hostile environment I've ever seen Mountaineer Field. And this was a noon kickoff, a freaking noon kickoff. That should have been a night game. In my opinion, West Virginia, Virginia Tech is a night game. So it being a noon kickoff, place was rocking way more than some of the night games that I've been to Morgantown. So yeah, it came close, but still not quite there. So the best way to compare a game to Pitt, West Virginia is just playing Pitt, West Virginia, because no other game is going to equal that.
Ferris is letting us know that LSU, Auburn, Notre Dame, UNC, and Oklahoma are also interested in JT Daniels. So I looked up this article from SI that he's citing. It was posted on March 2nd. So I don't know the incomplete timeline of JT Daniels in all of this, but that may have been posted as conjecture prior to JT Daniels deciding on he was looking at the 3 schools that he's looking at, because I've heard nothing more about. I've heard constantly Oregon State, Missouri, and West Virginia from dozens of sources versus LSU, Auburn, Notre Dame, North Carolina, and Oklahoma, which he's not going to be the starter at Oklahoma. They got a starting quarterback, and the other places he would really have to battle for the job, really have to battle a pretty decent quarterback room for the job.
Well, and the sources that are saying, narrowing it down to Oregon State, Missouri, and West Virginia, are getting that straight from the horse's mouth. That's what JT Daniels has said. So he has, whether those programs are interested in him or not, it's probably kind of too late. I think he's too far down his path of, here's what I've thought about, and here are the 3 places that, at least on their face, check off the most boxes of that checklist that he has. So
absolutely.
Yeah, maybe they're interested, but I don't think that's reciprocated.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Did y'all see the way too early Big 12 win total predictions by 247?
I did.
Oh my gosh, they snubbed the entire Big 12, not just West Virginia. they snubbed the entire Big 12. So they had Oklahoma with 9 wins, Oklahoma State with 8, Baylor with 7, Iowa State 7, Kansas State 7, Texas with 7, Texas Tech with 7, TCU 6, West Virginia 6, and Kansas 2.
So they understand that these teams play each other. So somebody's got to win the games, number one. Number two, maybe they think they're going to go winless out of conference. Everybody.
Maybe, or maybe everybody goes,
I don't know what the math is on that.
5-4. Everybody goes 5-4 or 4-5 in league play.
So, yeah. So let's add that up real quick. Give me those numbers real quick. Let's add them up here.
All right. Oklahoma has 9 wins.
Okay.
Oklahoma State, 8 wins.
17.
Baylor, 7.
24.
Iowa State, 7.
31.
Kansas State, 7.
38.
Texas, 7.
45.
Texas Tech, 7.
52.
TCU, 6.
58.
West Virginia, 6.
64.
And Kansas, 2.
66. We got 10 teams playing 12 games each. There's 120 games. So the conference is going to go 66 and 54. And we know that they're going, 9 games? What's that come out to in conference? The conference is going to go,
That's 90.
is that 45 and 45,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, 45-45.
That's 21 and 9 outside the conference, but with a lot of FCS and group of 5 games, I guess that's fair. 21 and 9.
But we had 2 teams. Didn't we have 2 teams have 10-win season? And with the bowl, we had 3, didn't we?
Yeah, but they can't predict the bowl, so they're just
Right.
predicting the 12 game. But yeah, Baylor, Oklahoma State 10 and 2. Oklahoma was 10 and 2. Had 3 10-win teams.
Yeah. I don't know. I just thought that was a little bit, undercut on the entire Big 12.
Oklahoma State was 11 and 1. Then they lost the Big 12
exactly.
championship. So it had an 11-win team and 2 10-win teams. So they're smashing everyone together.
Exactly. So I guess they're expecting everybody, the entire Big 12, to come towards the median. There's no elite teams, only one really bad team, and everybody else is just kind of bunched together at the median.
Yeah, because everybody's going to make a bowl game except Kansas.
And only 3 games separate first place, Oklahoma, and next to last place, West Virginia. 9 wins to 6 wins.
Well, that's including out-of-conference games.
Yeah, that's true.
So Oklahoma at 9 and 3.
Total wins.
So Oklahoma at 9 and 3. I got to conjecture that their big game out of conference is Nebraska. They're still going to be a pretty heavy favorite there. Oklahoma's going to win the Big 12 at 6 and 3. When does that happen?
These guys did not do their math
happen.
properly. They did not do their math properly.
I don't know when the last time a Big 12 champion was 7 and 2 in the conference.
Yeah. Somebody they didn't comprehend the concept of math and how.
Well, it's possible.
How the season works. I mean, it's possible, but how likely is it?
It's not very, unless you predict essentially that half or more of the in-conference games are basically pushes.
Right.
And then you flip a coin as to who you predict the winner to be when you've got push on your line. That's about the only way that it happens.
So now that makes me ask another question. So with 6 wins, they have West Virginia next to the bottom of the Big 12. So apparently they're saying we're going to have a bad Big 12 regular season. So are they predicting us to go undefeated and out of conference and beat both Pitt and Virginia Tech, but then totally tank in the Big 12 conference play? I'm totally confused with this.
How many other teams have 6 wins?
Us and TCU.
Unless they're just arbitrarily grouping teams together instead of giving a hint to, we believe TCU is going to be higher in the conference standings, therefore we're listing them higher. Maybe they're just listing them alphabetically. Who knows what they should explain that.
Yeah. Because I see with the sevens, Baylor, then Iowa State, then Kansas. Yeah, that's alphabetically.
But no, you make a great point. Yeah, it's probably alphabetical, but you make a great point. If West Virginia is second to last in the conference and they go 6-6 overall, they've got to go 3-6 in the. You've got to have teams losing conference games.
Yep.
And when is the second to last team in the conference been as good as 3-6? That's almost mathematically. That's tough to do.
Yeah.
Well.
And you already know I'm going to say this. I disagree with the 6-win total. I think the reason people are so low on West Virginia is, of course, what we saw last year. We went 6-7, lost our bowl. But it's not as simple as that. I've pointed out that 4 of our 6 losses were 50-50 football games. And sure, we could flip all 4 of them and have a 10-win season, but at the same time, we could flip Virginia Tech and end up not even going to a bowl. Last year came down to one game, okay? That one game was the home game against Texas Tech. That was supposed to be a gimme game. That was supposed to be a tune-up game. I think we were thinking past it. We let Texas Tech build a tremendous lead. We came back, tied it, but gave Texas Tech enough time to kick that field goal, and that deflated us. And that's really what killed our season last year. I'm surprised that we were actually able to salvage the season after that. We got some wins that people didn't think we would get because we lost to Texas Tech. If we can avoid that game in 2022, West Virginia is capable of having a 10-win season. I'm not predicting West Virginia to have a 10-win season. I am predicting West Virginia to at least go 7-5, probably 8-4. But my point is, as long as we avoid that game, that Texas Tech game that was from last year, and not do something like that again this year, we're going to be fine. And with Graham Harrell, that's going to be the thing that flips those 50-50 football games. Because when I looked at those 50-50 football games, I was like, what do we need to flip those games? Where did we come short? What did we do wrong? Easy answer, the offense. The offense. Our defense kept us in football games we had no business being in. So our offense gets just a little bit better, and we can flip those 50-50 football games. With Graham Harrell, our offense is going to be much better. So that's me trying to explain my thought process as far as the optimism that I have for West Virginia next year. I think what went wrong last year, what needed to change this year, and what did we need to avoid. And I think we did everything we need to correct what we needed to correct. Now it comes down to we have to avoid that Texas Tech game. And it's not necessarily Texas Tech this year. I'm just saying that game that you're supposed to win, thinking it's a gimme game, and you blow it, and it deflates you. We have to avoid that deflating loss.
I'm going to jump in real quick and rewind the conversation 5 minutes, only because if I make a statement like I did about it being difficult and very rare for a Big 12 champion to have 2 losses, then I like to go and verify when I make those types of statements to either say I was dead wrong, I shouldn't have said that, or to verify, okay, so conceptually I'm right. I was wrong about last year. Baylor was 7-2. They won the Big 12 championship. But there have been only 4 teams in the last 18 years that have won a Big 12 championship with 2 losses.
Okay.
So that was my point.
I got you.
It doesn't happen much.
But
let alone 6-3.
Right.
Unless Oklahoma's going to lose to Nebraska, I guess they could.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't thinking about that.
I'm curious to get your takes on, and this kind of plays into what we were planning anyway, and also the conversation that is being initiated by Christian on the screen concerning West Virginia's athletic director becoming the next commissioner of the Big 12. Before we get to that point, whoever wants to jump in on Bob Bowlesby's tenure with the Big 12, it was about 10 seasons. It's kind of ironic that he stepped into an expansion situation where Colorado, Texas A&M, Missouri, Nebraska left, and the additions were made to West Virginia and TCU. And then right at the end of his tenure, Oklahoma, Texas take off. And he didn't make up for those losses, but who could have made up for those losses? I think he did about as well as he could and grabbed the best 4 group of 5 teams available. And all 4 of them are much better than a pretty good selection of Power 5 teams. So it's kind of just ironic that he was on the bookend of his tenure and dealing with expansion. So just your thoughts about Bob Bowlesby and your evaluation of his work with the Big 12.
I ranked him number 2 in current Power 5 commissioners, right behind the SEC. I had him above Kevin Warren. I had him above George Klavkoff, and I had him above Jim Phillips. Reason being, a lot of people really got on to me about having him above Kevin Warren. And I go back to the 2020 COVID season and how the Big Ten looked silly because of Kevin Warren and his, lack of being able to make a choice when he needed to. But for Bob Bowlesby, I think he did a really good job for the situation he was thrown in, especially because when he got there, like you said, Colorado, Nebraska, Missouri, Texas A&M, 4 of the founding members of the Big 12 just left. So he goes out and gets West Virginia and TCU. That definitely does not make up for the loss, but it helps. Now, people also want to point to, under his watch, they also lost Oklahoma and Texas. Yeah, to the SEC. Who's going to be able to combat that? I don't even know if the Big Ten would be able to keep the SEC from getting teams if they really wanted to. So I call that a wash. But that happened. He goes out and gets BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF. The four best group of 5 teams you can possibly get out there. And a lot of people would say, well, why didn't you go to the Pac-12 and try to get these, or the Big Ten, or the ACC? Basically, other Power 5s. Money. You run into buyout, and you run into big buyouts. So he got the 4 best brands available for a really cheap price. So I think he was a great businessman. I think he was a great leader. You go back to the pandemic year in 2020, great decision maker, decisive. With the pandemic year, I credit the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC at the highest regard because they were the most decisive. So, I put him up there with those, the ACC, SEC. And you combine that with getting those 4 great brands, surviving. I mean, just the fact that the Big 12 survived, 6 huge losses, 6 founding members, and yet the new Big 12 is going to look pretty decent, probably better than the Pac-12, arguably better than the ACC. They're going to be, about the middle of the pack. Definitely not better than the Big 10. Definitely not better than the SEC, but still looking good. And according to Mike Gundy, they're actually looking to go to 14 teams in 5 years. I think Bob Bowlesby did a wonderful job considering the situation he was put into.
I don't know that I fully agree with that, but kind of indifferent on whether Bowlesby was a good commissioner or not, to be honest. But I think it may be hard to say that the addition of these 4 teams, while they've had tremendous success in their respective G5 conferences, are going to come in and immediately make the Big 12 the 3rd best conference behind the SEC and Big 10. Right now, I think the Big 12 probably is already there. Losing Texas and Oklahoma and replacing it with those 4, I don't know if it helps or hurts. I mean, Houston, they had a good last season under Dana Holgorsen, but his first 2 years were no cakewalk.
Well, hold on one second. Let's rewind a second. All right. Understand now. We're talking about success on the field, not necessarily money right now, right? Success on the field. How good of a conference will be on the field. I think with Texas, it's not that big of a loss because I actually talked about that today on my channel. 6 out of their last 10 years, they've been unranked, finished 4 times unranked and 3 losing seasons. Texas has not been very good at all. They had a 3-year stretch under Tom Herman where they were decent. They finished, in the top 25. They had that 1 year where they finished in the top 10. So to me, the question is Oklahoma. And Oklahoma has been the flag bearer for the Big 12 when it comes to the playoffs. Last year was kind of our warm-up year to show if we could get to the playoffs. And Baylor and Oklahoma State, yeah, they stepped up, knocked Oklahoma out. They competed for the Big 12 championship, but didn't get to the playoffs. So the biggest question is, can the Big 12 get to the playoffs without Oklahoma and Texas? I think as far as being a strong conference, we will at least be the 4th best, maybe the 4th, maybe the 3rd best. I think we'll be better than the Pac-12, depending on USC.
I just want to see what those teams do in Power 5 competition, primarily because when you recruit G5 guys, and you recruit, you're basically getting the mid-tier 3 stars are the premiers of your class, and the low-tier 3 stars are the guys who are filling the numbers, filling the depth chart out. And outside of Oklahoma and Texas, and you're right about Texas, they recruit the ever-living crap out of the football team, and they're top 7 to 15 every year in the recruiting rankings, but they never perform like it, and they have not for basically a decade. Outside of an errant year here or there, I think the exception is actually in the last decade that Texas has a good year, but that it has, it's basically been mediocre every other. So listen, getting 5 and 4-star guys in high numbers does not guarantee success, and Texas is proof of it. But only having a couple what you would call sort of teal chip guys that are like the high 3 stars, and that's the core talent of your team, competing against teams like Oklahoma State, Baylor, and TCU, and even West Virginia that have 12 to 14 4-star blue chip guys on their roster at any given time. It's a big jump. So I want to see what they do with it on the field before I make conclusions as to how good of a move it is. I think Bowlesby's biggest problem is that he was reactionary and not proactive. And that's the big criticism that I have of him, is that the writing was on the wall with Oklahoma and Texas, and maybe there's nothing he could have done to have saved that and kept the SEC from poaching, because the SEC money is the SEC money. But I just consider him to be more of a reactionary guy, and that's been the big knock on the Pac-12 for the past 2 decades, is that they've reacted to things and they haven't actually done anything positive.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
How long is this show? How long are we going to go? Man, you guys said so many things that I could talk for hours about. Let me try to be concise. All right. So first and foremost, to Travis's point, it appeared during the pandemic year that, Kevin Warren botched that whole situation with the Big Ten. It wasn't so much what he decided, but what he publicly stated. And then he stated that as, this is lock, stock, barrel, what we're doing. And then a couple weeks later, that's not what they did. So anyway, put him aside. It appeared as though Bowlesby was following along with the SEC and the ACC. To Travis's point, that the Big 12 kind of held back and waited, and the Pac-12 they were the last ones that were going to play football. The Big Ten, I think, has a big disconnect between coaches, players, and fans that are full throttle football, but academic elites who want to hold to different standards. So that's why they had a big fight, and that the SEC really drove it, and the ACC was right there, and then the Big 12 kind of followed along. That was at least my perception of the situation. Okay. To Bowlesby's credit, I cut a video right after they lost Texas, Oklahoma, and said, go get UCF, BYU, Cincinnati, and Houston. And that's exactly what they did, because I looked at those as being, this thought that they could go get somebody from the Big Ten. Who's going to leave the Big Ten and make all that money to jump on a sinking ship or a potentially sinking ship? So all credit to Bob Bowlesby. He did as well as he could and got the 4 best programs I thought that were possible to grab. And to Chris's point, the Big 12 is in a precarious state. Look at all conferences in the past that have imploded. If a couple get picked off, then it's very crucial what happens next. Because when you're at 10 and you get down to 8, when everybody else is at 12 and 14, if you don't go grab somebody to solidify your situation and a couple more jump and you're down to 6, then the other ones are going to run scared, and your conference's history, it's over. So it was imperative to move and make it happen. Now, this is a very side note to all this, and I don't want to make this as a criticism to Bowlesby, but I'm just conjecturing here. And I don't know if that this is fair, and I'm going to state it out front. If you're a major conference commissioner for 10 years, and we know now after the fact that Texas and Oklahoma were talking to the SEC for like 8 months, 9 months, something like that, I would think that you would have enough relationships in the game to have caught wind of that. It's, again, that I don't want to make that as a criticism for sure. It's just a thought. The only thing I'll say about the 4 that added, again, I think they did as well as they could. To Travis's point, who really outlined the recruiting aspect of it, and all of that is, from my perspective, right on the mark. I cut a video. I looked at the performances of those 4 schools against the Power 5 the previous 5 years, and it was respectable. It was basically 500. I don't know what that's going to do for the Big 12. It's going to solidify it from a numbers standpoint. It's not going to be embarrassing, but who's Ohio State in the Big 12 now? Who's Clemson in the Big 12? Who's even maybe Penn State or Michigan? Who's obviously Alabama? You could go through the other conferences. The Pac-12 has been really bad. They're hoping USC and Oregon are going to be who they're supposed to be. I just see a really good conference that's going to be fun to watch and like super, super competitive with like 9 out of 12 schools that could win. But I don't know if any of them are going to have the resources or the ability, the recruiting footprint, or any of that to play with the big boys and compete for a playoff spot. And then my last point's going to be, you could take this comment or this as half full or half empty. Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, BYU, they're all almost at their zenith right now. Cincinnati's certainly at their zenith. They're at their pinnacle. UCF's just a couple years removed from its pinnacle. Houston just had a 12-1 season. They've been really good in the past in spurts, of course. And BYU has been really good in the past, but they were chugging along for 20 years at 7-6, 8-5, and now they've won double digits the last 2 years. So you could look at glass half full. Those 4 programs are great right now. Or glass half empty. That's as good as they get. They might not be as good. There might be some of those droughts for all of them upcoming.
I think the biggest thing for the Big 12 is y'all both hit it right on the head. I don't think that there's going to be an Oklahoma or a Clemson or an Alabama or an Ohio State, a team that every year you're like, watch out for that team. They own this conference. Who's going to knock them off this year? There's not going to be that question of who's going to knock so-and-so off. I think for the Big 12, it's going to be like, who's going to be so-and-so this year? I think every year it could be potentially somebody different. I don't think anybody's really going to own the Big 12, but that's not to say that it won't be a strong conference. That's not to say that they won't be able to get to the playoffs. It just means until somebody can establish them as, the alpha of the Big 12, because Oklahoma was the alpha. They were the Clemson. They were the Alabama. They were the Ohio State. I guess the Oregon or USC for Pac-12. They need to figure that out. But for the Big 12, there is no top dog right now. So that'll get figured out. I don't know if it'll be one person, but from year to year, it will be a different team. Now, will that team get to the playoffs? I think from time to time. I don't think it'll be quite as bad as the Pac-12, where they're on, 6-year drought? Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I think we'll be in the rotation at least once every 2 years. Maybe not every year, but every other year we can get a team into the playoffs. Maybe a different team, not the same team, but we'll have that team.
Well, and it also depends on if the playoffs expand the next time they talk about it and the next time that the TV deals are to be renewed. Which even though we've had that talk here before, and I come down on the side of not liking the expansion, I think it's going to happen. There's too much money at stake for it not to. And also, we talk about Cincy, UCF, and Houston, and we have not mentioned BYU yet. And I almost think that BYU may be an exception to what I said, because BYU has had a number of, 4 to 7 year periods in their history where they've had some sustained success. And BYU has had, they've had those times when they found and groomed really good quarterbacks. Some of the best one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history, a BYU alum, right? So I think that BYU is actually long-term, if the Big 12 survives and continues to survive and thrive, BYU may be the best long-term addition to the conference.
100% agree. The two teams that I trust the most out of those 4, this might surprise you, the 2 teams that I trust the most would be BYU and UCF. Now, Cincinnati, I know they're better than UCF right now. They're hitting their peak, but UCF has had a longer sustained amount of time. Not all that long, just longer. Houston is up and down all around. You never know what you're going to get with Houston. None of us expected Houston to have as good of a season as they did last year. I don't think they're going to sustain that at all, especially knowing Dana Holgorsen the way I know him. The way he recruits is transfer portal. So Houston, I don't trust them at all. Cincinnati, I agree with y'all. I think they're at their peak. They could start sliding down at any minute. I like BYU and UCF kind of at a sub-level maybe. BYU the most and UCF right under them. Those are the 2 teams that I trust the most in the long run.
The Houston metro area for high school football players is just ridiculously flooded with talent. So whether that's Dana Holgorsen and I, based on past conversations, I don't believe either one of you has that much faith in Dana Holgorsen's recruiting skills, but who knows who the next coach is going to be. If he's able to convince those guys, hey, you're going to be able to stay home and play big boy football in a Power 5 conference and get to a playoff and all those good things, then maybe they take advantage of this. Man, there's 4 and 5 stars tripping over each other in Houston.
I actually am one of the West Virginia fans and writers that is not as hard on Dana Holgorsen as the rest. I think he gets a bad rap for certain things more than he should. But one thing we got to remember with the context of Dana Holgorsen in West Virginia is that he navigated us into the Big 12. We were recruiting at that, it was still a Power 5 level. Sort of, it was 6 at the time, but we were recruiting at a low level compared to other Big 6 conference teams at the time. But we were in a decaying Big East, and we transitioned under Dana Holgorsen. And compared to what we were recruiting under Coach Rodriguez and Coach Stewart, which was, Coach Stewart brought in a lot of blue chips, but none of them ever actually arrived at the university. A lot of them had academic troubles or, just sort of fell off the map. Dana actually started our recruiting trend of getting multiple blue chips every year. It never happened before him that we would get multiple that would actually show up on campus and play football games. with the exception of Bill Stewart's last year when he had Gino and Tavon and Stedman all come in that same year. So Dana actually might be a good fit for Houston at this time because he's overseeing a transition from weaker competition to better competition and recruited accordingly at a school that historically did not recruit very well. And he used the transfer portal to great effect in putting that together. Prior to Dana Holgerson's arrival in Morgantown, the most blue chips that West Virginia had ever had on the roster at any one time was 9. And it went up to 17 at one point with Dana Holgerson. So it's a pretty big jump in the talent that's on a roster. And I just, as a result, in looking at that, I don't share with that criticism of Dana and that hatred of him. Don't necessarily like him either. He had a lot of flaws, but I think bringing talent in is not one of them.
Well, I think yeah, I can agree with that point. I think the thing that people, associate Dana Holgerson with is maybe to your point, he did start, West Virginia on a road to where they could get more talent, start using the transfer portal more, but never did anything with it. I mean, we had one 10-win season, and even in that 10-win season, we really had no chance of winning the Big 12 because the two best teams, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, we got lambasted, and then we went to the bowl and got slapped around by Miami. So I can agree with you. He started to pave a way for West Virginia to get more talent. He just never coached that talent up. In some cases, he coached the talent down. 2018, that football team should have, at minimum, been a 10-win team. Definitely in the Big 12 picture, probably win the Big 12, maybe get to the playoffs. But, of course, that didn't happen. So I'm just trying to, say the reason why he gets a bad rap is he got a lot of talent, but he didn't do anything with it. It was average to slightly above average sometimes. We never had that special year like we did under Don Nehlen, or that special year like we did under Rich Rodriguez. It was just, we're going to be good, but that's about it. Nothing to remember forever. I don't remember a specific time under Holgerson where I'm like, man, that was a fantastic year.
Well, I think, I think we ought to brainstorm behind the scenes and maybe do one of our weekly shows just on this point because it could be interesting. But I don't know that I agree either that Dana Holgerson didn't coach talent up. I think his problem was execution of the nitty-gritty details that win and lose football games. I mean, we were several years in a row under him. We were one of the most 10 penalized teams in the entire country. I mean, we lost a lot of yards through lack of discipline. That year that you're talking about, 2018, I mean, we had a huge lead. I mean, all the momentum in the world against Oklahoma State going into halftime. And, they just took the wind out of our sails. And if we don't lose that game and we don't fumble away what was an apparent victory against Oklahoma to end that season, we only lose one game that season, and we're a serious playoff contender at that point. But that's a what if. I mean, that's where Dana Holgerson failed. But I actually did at one point. I came up with a formula, sort of used Moneyball baseball type of statistics, and came up with a formula for all right, so here's the average number of 5-star recruits that end up making it into the NFL. And here's their average draft position. And doing that for every star recruit, every category, 5, 4, 3, 2, and unranked. And then I looked at what Dana had on his roster when he started, other than seniors who he had minimal effect on. So I started with the juniors that he inherited and down. And Dana Holgerson actually put a much higher percentage of those high 3-star and low 4-star guys into the NFL than the nationwide averages were, and at a higher average draft position. I mean, think about Carl Joseph, right? Carl Joseph was a mid-tier 3-star guy that by the odds, he shouldn't have been drafted, and he was drafted in the first round, well above his ADP for 3 stars, and he put a higher percentage in. So he got guys into the league too, and so far, that's one thing that Neil Brown has not done. Neil Brown has not put very many players into the league, and I don't know that bodes well for long-term success. I think that will change in the coming years because you have Dante Stills coming out. Letty Brown, I think, unfortunately, is going to be an undrafted free agent, somewhat by the fact that he's running back and he ran a very slow 400 or 40-yard dash. I mean, so it's like, someone's going to take a flyer on him as a UDFA, but that's it. But we've got talent there, and if it coalesces in the right way, he could trend to getting guys in the league. But so far, he's done it at a much worse clip than Dana Holgorsen. But yet he's brought in more 4-star, at least high school guys. But part of the issue too with Brown, to be fair, is that a lot of his guys have just not graduated yet. They're not done with their eligibility.
Exactly.
And a lot of Dana's guys have left. They're off the team now. I mean, most of our transfers, still about 65% of the guys who have left since Brown arrived were Dana guys.
Yep. That's what I was about to say.
Yeah, but to say, I mean, Dana developed guys. His teams could not put it all together on the field in a way that gave us that exciting season that Coach Rod gave us for 3 years, and that Don Nehlen gave us 3 separate years, and 2 in particular.
Yeah, to your point, whenever you were talking about the 2018 season, I mean, that wraps up Dana Holgorsen at West Virginia. I mean, there were more what-if moments than, do you remember that year? It was always, if this would have, and it was 1 or 2 moments. It wasn't necessarily just the entire game. We threw it away. It's a couple of moments here and there. But I think that's the gray cloud that overshadows Dana Holgorsen and could keep following him while he's at Houston.
Yeah, I agree with that. Execution was a problem. I don't think talent was, though. In fact, I think that his offenses kind of maybe inflated talent a little bit and got guys into the league that did not end up doing much with it. Offensive skill players.
Well, and his defenses were horrible.
Yeah, no, that's right. But still, we put a lot of those guys we put in the league were defensive guys. I mean, Bruce Irvin, Carl Joseph, Daryl Worley, guys who got drafted higher than you ever would have thought when they first got recruited here.
So, Travis, I'm curious. It's one thing to take all the 5 stars from every class because there's about 35 to 40 of them, and then track their entry into the NFL, how well they played, whatever. Yes, because then you got 4 stars. You got how many? Because there's usually a top 300 list, whether that's on ESPN or on 247 Sports, and those are all 4 and 5 stars. So the 4 stars go how deep? Usually about 400, something in that range, 450.
No, it's not quite that many. It's about 305-ish on average.
Really? Okay, it barely goes off the 300 board. Okay, and then you got 3 stars that go for however many hundred after that.
Yeah, well, in the 3 stars, you just scroll down until you get to, okay, there's no more 3 stars left. And I think it's like 1,797th recruit. And then you're like, okay, well, let me subtract the 4 and 5 stars from that number. And now I've got my pile.
Yeah. So you went back how many years?
When I did the math, I went back 7.
You went back 7 years. So you're tracking about 13,000 players or something like that.
Yes.
And you're trying to determine, number one, whether they reached the NFL.
If they were drafted.
Yep.
I did not. I thought about maybe doing the UDFA, but no, that would have been way too much.
Okay. So it's a very strong indicator. It's not perfect because obviously some guys excel as free agents and other guys are busts as draft picks, but I come up with metrics all the time that I admit, hey, it's not perfect, but it's a strong indicator.
Yeah, I
All
mean,
right.
you look at you try to get a big enough sample size and let law of averages work in your favor on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So what percentage of 5-stars make it to the NFL or are drafted?
It's just under half.
Okay. And then where's that go to 4-stars?
4-stars was
It's a hockey stick, isn't it?
yeah, it is. 4-stars was about 10 to 12%. And then 3-stars were down to like 4.5%.
Yep.
Okay.
And then 2-stars, it was like I don't know, like 0.5%, and unranked it was unranked was where the measure became less perfect because you kind of had to look at the number of open scholarships total every year and kind of subtract out and back out because some players like didn't even have recruiting profiles that ended up making it to the NFL. Like, they had huddle pages, but they didn't have a 247 or Rivals profile. But it's that. So that number is microscopic. The number of 2-star or unrated guys that end up making it.
Makes sense.
Interesting. All right, everyone. We appreciate you being here. And we've got a West Virginia channel. So you might be watching on the main channel. You might be watching on the West Virginia channel. Please subscribe. We are aiming toward 1,000 subs. Once we get to that threshold, YouTube takes you a lot more seriously, gets those videos out into traffic. Check out Kuz's Corners video that he released just here in the last couple of days. It was a great conversation he had with former punter. Don't let me try to fill in the name. Thank you, Travis.
Yeah.
One more time.
Tyler
Sumter.
Thank you, because I know I talked over you. And that was a tremendous conversation about the perspective of a college football player regarding NIL, interactions with fans on social media. It's a pretty fascinating look. And again, please subscribe to our West Virginia channel. Head on over to Golden Blue Dude. What have you been working on, man?
You know what? I've been working on just different stuff when it comes to like Oklahoma and going to Texas. And I actually have my annual logo brackets out. So I have people voting on who they think has the best logo. So I'm having fun, man. I'm having fun.
Travis.
I am working on finishing up. I've got 3 position preview articles left until we roll into the spring game. And then I'm working on my national level transfer portal update. And I've expanded into looking at the G5 world as well, which has added some time to the plate in creating and maintaining my spreadsheets. But I'm actually surprised, just to give you a preview, I'm actually surprised the number of guys that are leaving G5 schools is about 3.5 to 4 less players a year on average that transfer out of those institutions. I mean, I guess surprised on its face, but then I started thinking about it and I'm like, that makes sense because where do you have left to go if you don't crack the 2 deep at G5?
It's true.
I was posting coaches rankings this week, went through each Power 5 conference and listed my coaches rankings, Pac-12, Big 12, ACC. I got to the Big 10 and I thought, you know what? Here was my incentive. I was lazy. I didn't want to produce a video. And I thought, well, just do a live stream and I'm going to tell people what my Big 10 coaches rankings are. And we did a call-in show for 3.5 hours last night. I finally had to tell people, okay, well, I've had enough. I can't talk anymore for 3.5 hours. It started quite the debate, Big 10 coaches rankings. So I'll have to bring my Big 12 coaches rankings to this show and see if you guys agree with me on Neil Brown and the rest of the crew there in the Big 12. But we may do the same with the SEC and just open up the phone lines and deliver my SEC coaches rankings. Then we're going to start on positions and go through the positions across college football.
You might want to prepare about 7 hours for those SEC fans.
Yeah. No, a full 24 hours.
Well, we did that leading into the season last year. So
I remember.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for making this happen. Without you two, we don't have a West Virginia channel or a West Virginia show. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, happy to do it. Thank you, Mark.
I'm glad that we started this because West Virginia, I've always felt like West Virginia has a passionate and big enough fan base to where it should have something like this. So we actually appreciate you, Mark.
Thank you. Well, we're seeing slow growth. I noticed us close to the 80 range. We were in the 80 range in terms of live viewers. We used to be more in the 30s and 40s. So we're making our way. So appreciate everybody being here. Bring some folks with you. I would love to know how many different fan bases were represented in our show tonight. So it's not just West Virginia. I saw Florida, Michigan, Notre Dame, Pitt, of course, on down the line. So tons of other fan bases, but we're here every Friday. But also subscribe and hit the bell for the notifications because sometimes we need to switch it up because we're trying to coordinate schedules. But typically Friday at 8 Eastern time, be here. Bring some friends with you, and we'll do it up big. Also, there are a ton of spring games tomorrow. I'm going to be live most of the day on various channels, Nebraska, Florida State, Clemson, and right here on the main channel as well. So you will be sick of me by the end of the weekend, I'm sure. Guys, we appreciate you being here again and you guys making it happen, and we'll do it all hopefully next Friday.
And for the non-West Virginia fans that are in the chat, I'm a West Virginia fan, but I also cover all of college football on my YouTube channel as well.
Absolutely. And always has an interesting look. So get on over to Gold and Blue Dudes channel right here on YouTube. See everybody.